Oh howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. It's been 3¼ days into the Necropolis expansion, and Grinding Gear Games have put out a statement on what they're working on at the moment. This is going to have a huge impact on everyone playing the Necropolis expansion, so it's definitely worth breaking down. That's what I want to do here. Firstly, there's going to be a lot of nerfs to the dangers that are posed by the Necropolis encounters themselves. Secondly, there's going to be a number of buffs to the crafting system that's included. These are essentially power at the expense of agency in some scenarios. So while this is mostly going to make it easier to craft any specific item, if you do have a really unusual item you're trying to make, then this might actually work against you. But overwhelmingly, I think people will find that this is a significant improvement to the system. Additionally, I think this is going to allow you to target higher tiers of modifiers where previously there was no way of interacting with that type of modifier with Necropolis. For example, flask mods on belts, this is going to be something that should allow you to target higher tiers of those particular mods. Anyways, let's go through this, and the first thing to note is that our hope is to get each change out as soon as they're ready. So this means that this is not necessarily going to come together bundled in one massive patch at the end of the week. This is likely to be individual changes that will go live on a day-by-day basis. Grinding Gear Games have categorized these changes into two main groups. There's zone-to-zone gameplay, and then there's the crafting system that's involved. And that crafting system is still being worked out. I would like to remind people that at this time in the Sentinel League, the player base as a whole had not yet learned that prefixes and suffixes were independent on Recombinators, and really until you learnt that, you didn't get very good results out of Recombinators. You just merged together two items, and normally you'd get something that was less cohesive than either of the items that you put in, and that was worse than both of them. Once you worked out the suffix and prefix independence, and also once you worked out some of the underlying complexity of the RNG system that was used to work out which mods survived and which ones didn't, from then on, Sentinel's Recombinators became extremely strong, but none of that was known on day 3, and honestly, the stuff that we were making at that point in the league was pretty marginal, even though Recombinators ended up being the most powerful crafting system the game has ever seen, able to do everything that original release Harvest had been able to do, but also able to do a lot of things that original release Harvest couldn't do. In short, with Recombinators, you could get any 6 mods you wanted onto any particular item in the game. But early on, we didn't know that. Early on, they seemed pretty fringe and marginal. Anyway, let's start with the zone-to-zone gameplay changes. Firstly, you can itemize corpses as they drop. This is no longer going to cost a Chaos Orb, so you can put them into your inventory as normal, rather than having them go directly to the morgue. Secondly, this one's just a quality of life change, but it's an important one. Each downside from area to area will display the amount of collectible corpses and Allflame Embers that they cause. I feel like a lot of these are sort of functionally an extra map mod that only applies to a specific category of monsters, and I don't think it would be a bad thing for those monsters to have increased item quantity and increased item rarity as well, so that's something that Grinding Gear Games could perhaps consider. And of course that would need to be public information if it was done. Next, they're going to be increasing the number of collectible corpses and Allflame Embers that drop as a result of difficult mods, specifically. So those ones, the hardest mods, things like lots of extra projectiles, monsters always stun, these are likely to get a big increase in the number of collectible corpses and Allflame Embers. Additionally, there's going to be a lot of buffs to Allflame Embers in general. The number of them that drop are going to be increased, there's going to be additional packs that are going to drop that are going to be more rewarding, and some of the existing rewards and pack sizes from Allflame Embers are going to be getting a boost as well. This is going to be pretty significant. I know that these are hugely impactful if you get them during the axe. I had 2 of the Gemling ones during the axe, Gemling Archers and Gemling Berserkers, and between them I got something like 15, 17% or higher quality gems. The thing is that what's an extremely exciting reward when you're in Act 2 ends up being much less significant once you get up to Tier 8 maps. And especially once you get to Tier 16 maps, where if you wanted to get random gems that have a lot of quality on them, you'd go and run maybe 10 counter thaumaturgy heists, and you'd probably end up leaving with a full inventory of quality gems, and they'd be even higher quality than what you get from those. So you're going to get more Allflame Embers, there'll be new ones that are on average better than the ones that exist at the moment, and some of the existing ones will be better as well. In short, it's a triple buff. Next, we have a change that if Grinding Gear Games get the numbers on it right, it's going to feel really good, but if they get the numbers on it too high, then this might end up being a really big inflation league. And that is that the devoted modifiers are going to be more rewarding. This is the ones that cause monsters to drop better things than they otherwise would, notably the ones that are granting currency items. The sort of thing I'd like to see here is an increase in the number of ones that feel better than the current Chaos Orb ones, but don't feel quite as good as the current Divine Orb ones. So that there's a number of things where you're like, oh yeah, that's a cool reward, but that it's not going to be something that pummels the League economy so hard that it makes killing monsters that are not affected by the Necropolis expansion mechanics feel unrewarding. This is a pretty much impossible balance to get exactly right, but the closer they get it to right, the better I think it will feel overall. The final change that's being made in the map-to-map gameplay is they're lowering the danger of some of the most dangerous lantern modifiers, especially at endgame. Things like massive amounts of additional projectiles, things like monsters always stun, these are going to be toned down substantially. So we'll have to see the exact numbers on this. Previously I had dealt with these by replacing the packs with something pretty harmless like frogs, but this is going to be another option that you've got there, is just simply to endure them, or shuffle them around at least to a mechanically easier pack of monsters, and know that you're not creating a new terror that way. You're going to actually be able to deal with the mechanic a little bit better. Okay, so let's talk now about the Necropolis crafting. This is getting a number of buffs, and I think one of the important things to notice here is just how impactful this first change is going to be. You can select the base type of the item you wish to craft, subject to one important restriction, and that is that you can't request bases that are special in some way. So no Stygian Vices, but if it's a normal base, if it's a Sadist Garb, if it's a Val Regalia, if it's a Spine Bow, then you can guarantee that you can get it. As such, we are removing some of the crafts that allow you to influence Strength, Dex, and Int requirements, as they'll no longer be needed as you can freely select the base type you want. Note the special base types will still need to be obtained through specific corpses, such as Atlas base types and League base types like Stygian Vices. Some of the very rare things like Fractured modifiers are going to be more common. This is going to be really impactful because there's a number of things you can do to get a really good chance of getting one specific mod that's otherwise very rare. And I'll put a link to a video that I did yesterday, which actually still holds up after these changes, on the ways you can bias towards getting Haunted modifiers. Two main consequences to this. The first one is going to be that it'll be a lot easier to use the Grave crafting system in order to get yourself a helmet that has +1 maximum power charge as a Fractured mod, or the same thing with gloves, but it'll be a frenzy charge, or the same thing with boots, but it'll be an endurance charge. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Harbinger content is going to be considerably indirectly nerfed by this, because the most important thing that it produces, fracturing orbs, are going to be less valuable because there'll be less demand for them. Now here's the really big one though. We removed the tiers from most of the crafts. They'll now have the value of the highest tiers always. For example, instead of being able to get 200% or 500% increased chance of lightning modifiers, it will always be 500%. This is a really big deal if you're going to follow the advice from that video I was talking about before of stacking scarcer modifiers on a 6 mod item in order to do what I call pseudo-banning common mods, which is not actually banning them, but it's making them so much less common that the things you actually want to see are more realistic to get. You're going to need a lot less corpses to do that, and so you're going to be able to make a lot more attempts at it. Now this is the potentially very big one. We've taken all the crafts that affect the modifier rating and compressed it into a single stat that affects all modifiers instead of being type specific. This will not affect existing crafts you have, those will stop dropping, and the newer ones will start dropping once it's deployed. Now, this one is potentially very significant because we don't know as a community all of the exact nuances of the way that this modifier tier rating works. And there's some speculation that you can actually ban top tier mods with it if you go too much of a particular category of mod tier rating. We don't actually know if this is the case yet. I'm not aware of any serious testing that's been done because it would need to be probabilistic in nature, and so it would take a little while to get the tests done. But this is important to know about. If you want an unusual combination of modifiers on an item, for example, if you're using Leadership's Price, then you need to balance your two highest stats. In this situation, you might need to get exactly 32 dexterity as a suffix on a ring. Now, with the old version of the tier modifier, you had a chance of getting that with the Grave crafting. With the new version of it, you're actually not going to have a chance of getting that if you stack enough tier rating. So that's going to be an important thing to keep in mind. It is going to be, for the vast majority of use cases, an upgrade. It's one of those cases where grinding gear games are removing a little bit of agency and granting a lot of power simultaneously. The vast majority of people will find this setup better. But one thing with PathOfExile is that there's a lot of really weird corner cases where you want a combination of things that is extremely unlikely for anyone else to want. And if you're in that situation, this loss of agency is going to hurt. Next, there's 3 very important quality of life changes here. You'll be able to directly use coffins on your list of corpses in the morgue panel instead of having to find them within the morgue. The standard Windows shortcut key of Control F will go straight to the search, and we'll be sorting some crafts by type rather than level, making it easier to find crafts that are thematically linked to each other, for example, fire modifiers. Finally, the Gravecrafts that reroll sockets and links have been significantly buffed. Now these actually aren't the important socket and link modifying ones. The important socket and link ones are the ones that allow you to first force 4 links through the use of 3 of the corpse that says +1 minimum number of links up to a maximum of 4. Then on top of that, you add one that is +1 up to a maximum of 5. Then you add one that is +1 up to a maximum of 6. That package of 5 itemized corpses is stronger than anything they've done with the re-rolling sockets and links, which is sort of the backup plan. If you don't have enough of those more precious corpses, then these are the ones that you use in the interim. We'll have to see what the numbers on them end up being. Finally, Grinding Gear Games conclude by mentioning that one of the consequences of them launching over the Easter weekend was that they weren't able to get this out as soon as they would have liked. So the whole of Easter Monday in New Zealand was a minimal staffing day at Grinding Gear Games. And one of the lessons I've learned from this is they probably won't repeat the Easter launch weekend again, which is something that's ideal for me as someone that always uses the Easter long weekend to catch up with university friends that have scattered all around Australia over the years, because it's our only national 4-day weekend over a year, so it's a perfect time for interstate travel. And I've encountered that a lot from people. Some people have been saying this is the best time ever for a league start because it means that they're able to play uninterrupted for a few days. And other people are saying this is a terrible time for a league start because I'm interstate visiting family, or all sorts of other things like that. Anyways, in the future it looks like they're going to avoid major New Zealand public holidays as the launch weekends, and that seems like a sensible decision, and certainly one that I'm entirely behind. When's this patch going live? We don't know. Pieces of it will be going live as they're ready. I expect that probably most of these changes will be live by the end of the week, and they'll probably be coming out piece by piece with a prioritization system, probably the ones that reduce the power of the extremely sketchy endgame monster mods. Those are likely to be the first ones to be brought out, but that's only me speculating, and we'll see the details as they happen. May your Varlorbs and your Necropolis crafts have interesting results.